You're just in time to hear a story about a man that helped develop the passing game as we know it today, and a surprising twist of another innovation he did later in life. Tim Brown comes to tell us a tale from footballarchaeology.com, and he's up in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darin is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darin Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history, and welcome to another edition where we get to go back in time into some great gridiron history with our friend Timothy P. Brown of footballarchaeology.com. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darin. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting about the herrings of the world. There's a sea full of them.
And I don't think you're going to give us a red herring on this one. I think we're going to go right to some facts.
You assumed that I meant sea as in water, as opposed to sea as in Chicago.
Oh boy!
See,
was that your Letterman sweater that that Mr. Stagg gave you?
Yeah, this is Stagg gave this to me personally
from that great 1911 team that you played. No, so we're going to talk some Chicago Maroons. That's a great thing, and learn about a gentleman that till your tidbit came out recently, I didn't know much about. Frank Herring, and your title of your tidbit was Frank Herring, the Overhand Spiral and Mother's Day. A lot going on in that title.
Yeah,
and we'll hope to see some clarity by the end here.
Sure. Can I start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
So, I mean, he's a guy that I really had never paid attention to, but I've been doing, still research. I've written a fair amount, but I'm, still researching topics for my history of the early forward pass, the next book that I'm working on. And so, in one of my searches looking for overhand spiral and, just trying to find instances of that term being used back in the day, I came across a story of where Stagg was saying in like 1954 or 55 or something, he was saying that back in 1893 and 94, he had a guy playing for him at University of Chicago named Frank Herring. And that Herring somehow had figured out how to throw the overhand spiral. And again, the ball back then was a heck of a lot bigger, more of a rounded ball, and especially in the 1890s, it got smaller in 1902 or 3, and then again in late 20s and 30s. But so anyways, he figured out how to do this, and so Stagg kind of took advantage of that because Herring was the team quarterback, and so oftentimes the quarterback or the fullback would be the guys who would be deep. They'd kind of be like the deep safety on defense, and so they were the ones that often returned punts. So they had it set up that if the punt came to him and he had time, he would sometimes turn and throw an overhand spiral lateral to a teammate who's over on the other side of the field, and then that guy would take off. And I've come across references to Fielding Yost doing the same thing with his either Kansas or Nebraska teams, before he moved to Michigan. So
we could almost put this like the Music City Miracle or the Tennessee Titans. I don't know if they were Tennessee Titans at that time, but they beat somebody in a playoff game on one of those plays. Might have been Buffalo they beat, where they're on a punt play and threw a backwards pass all the way across the field.
Yeah.
Frank Weish, I think, caught it and went for big yardage.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of it. It's kind of like the lonesome end, or they used to call it the shoestring play, where a guy would be sitting there acting like he's tying a shoe and, be away from the rest of the team and then take off downfield. But so anyway, Stagg says this guy, through the pass, so he was on the Chicago team that went west, so crossed the Rockies for Christmas '94, played Stanford, played the Reliance Athletic. They played like a Salt Lake City team on the way back, and then they played one other game while they were in California. But anyways, first team to cross the Rockies, so he's part of that whole gang. But I don't know if it was after that semester, after that year, he then transferred. Now, he was from Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and that's just 30 miles from where Bucknell is. So, and this is something I didn't research prior to the writing the tidbit, but I did research it more, to talk to you tonight. So, but here's the Bucknell team of 1895. So he was at Chicago 93 and 94. In 95, he coached and played for Bucknell. And so this is Herring right there. And so he stays there a year. He also was the baseball and basketball coach, during that time, or during that year. And then for whatever reason, he transfers to Notre Dame the next year. So he played his senior year. He was the captain, the coach, and the quarterback for Notre Dame in 96. He remains on campus for 2 more years, coaches football 2 years, and I think he also had baseball those years as well. And then he graduated law school and then ends up sticking around in the South Bend area. But one of the reasons Herring came up in yesterday's tidbit, I shouldn't say yesterday's, he came up in another tidbit because he ended up, he was the coach when Indiana and Notre Dame played for the first time in 1898, and Indiana beat Notre Dame. It's the only time they have beaten them at Notre Dame. And of course, they play in the first round of the playoffs. So we'll see if they can beat them for a second.
And folks, we know that game's already been played when this is
Yeah.
airing, so we don't know the outcome. If we did, we
Yeah.
wouldn't be sitting here on podcast. We'd probably be raking in millions somewhere if we in
Yeah.
Vegas.
So then the final thing, you mentioned the title, Frank Herring, the overhand spiral, and Mother's Day. So living in South Bend, he became involved with the Elks, the fraternal organization or service organization. And at some speech that he gave in like 1908 or 1912 or something, at an Elks like convention in Indianapolis, he suggested that the U.S. have a day each year to recognize mothers. And so that was kind of the beginning of a movement to create a Mother's Day. And in 1914, Congress passed, some kind of resolution saying we are going to have Mother's Day every year from now on. And so the guy who is, best we know, the first one to throw the overhand spiral is also the inventor of Mother's Day. So he's the father of Mother's Day.
I still laugh at that. I read when you wrote it, and I still find it funny. It's very, very catchy. That's one of your better ones. That's
Well, that was actually, I kind of stole that from Notre Dame had a story about it, and they had that in there too. So
Father and Mother's Day.
all credit due to them.
All hail Notre Dame. All right, here we go. We got you to root for Notre Dame for once. That's good.
Well,
yes, so Tim, that is like one of those great stories that sort of blindsides the reader when I read it, or the listener here today. Just a cool thing to connect, something that we're all familiar with, Mother's Day, with this unknown player from 120 some years ago. It's pretty cool.
yeah, and I mean, I had no idea, right? I mean, so this is one of those where I came across Stagg saying, hey, I had this player. So then I start following him and chasing him down. And all of a sudden, I find this thing saying that he invented Mother's Day. So figured I had to go with that.
Well, your pigskin sleuthing and research has done
Yeah.
it again. So it's a great story, and I'm glad that you were able to preserve this guy and bring him to our attention in the modern world, and hopefully we can keep his story alive for future generations.
Once again, I'm going to use my fancy pointing skills. That is the man. That's Frank
Folks,
Earl
he's just showing
Herring.
off because he knows that I can't do that and find anything in my background because
I
it's like
can
a
use
mirror
my
image.
other hand too.
Oh my gosh, he's
See?
ambidextrous even at doing
Yeah.
this. Tim, speaking of showing off, why don't you tell folks where they can see your work and your tidbits, not only about Frank Herring, but some of the other great stories, and you show those off to the world too from football archaeology.
Yeah, sure. Just go to footballarchaeology.com. You can subscribe by submitting your email address. It's a Substack site, so it's widely used newsletter platform. But once you subscribe, you'll get the newsletter. Every time I publish a story, you'll get an email that contains the story. Of course, you can always go there whenever you want. You can also follow me on Blue Sky, where I post the fact that a story came out and provide some commentary here and there on some other things. So, anyways, that's the best way to do it.
Well, he is Tim Brown. Footballarchaeology.com is his site, and we thank you, Tim, for joining us once again, and we'd love to talk to you again next week about some more great football history.
Very good. Look forward to it. Thanks.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.